This is not a giant killer headphone, but it is one of the best headphones that you can buy at the price, if you can drive it. Everywhere we look, everything's about being slimmer, fitter, faster, lighter. Screw that. Let's talk about how great it is to be fat. And let's talk about why the Modhouse Tungsten is leading the fatness revolution. I had one very important question to ask Ryan from Modhouse Audio when I started reviewing his Tungsten headphones. And that was, why did they have to be so difficult to drive? If you're not familiar with the Tungstens, they're an open back planar magnetic headphone, and they're available in a single-sided or a double-sided magnet version. This decision alters the specs, the price and the sound of the headphones that you'll receive. And I'm reviewing the double-sided version of the Tungstens, which is the more naturally or neutrally tuned one. It's also the one that comes in the bundled package with the NLium amp HPA23RMH. That's how these arrived. And I'll link you at the end of this video to the review of this and the bundled headphone amp so you can check that out too. These are unique planar magnetic headphones because they have an impedance rating of 135 or 155 ohms for the single-sided or the double-sided magnet versions respectively. They then have sensitivity levels of 76 decibels per milliwatt or 78 decibels per milliwatt. And that's really, really low. For the double-sided version, you're going to need an amplifier that's approaching 1.5 watts of power at 150 ohms to know that you're not overstretching the amplifier when listening to the Tungstens. They will get loud enough with less powerful amplifiers, but the amplifier is going to be moving outside of its optimal range of operation, introducing distortion and therefore lowering overall sound quality. So that was my question to Ryan. Was this really necessary? It limits the options people have to enjoy the Tungstens without going out and investing in specific dedicated amplifiers to drive them. Was it worth the trade-off? The short version of Ryan's answer is that he tried a whole bunch of different driver designs within the Tungsten and found that the best possible sound came from using 24 karat gold wiring in the diaphragm of the driver. As a quick side note, if you're not familiar with how planar magnetic headphones work, basically it's a zigzag of wire that's attached to a thin film of plastic. The audio signal is then passed through that wire and the driver is repelled from or attracted to the magnets that surround the diaphragm. But Ryan didn't just try different metals, he also tried different thicknesses of wire too. And so the Tungsten is the result of bunches and bunches of testing of different metals and different thicknesses of wire, all mixed together to find the best result. The final decision was a thinner wire using 24 karat gold, and that's what results in the high impedance and the low sensitivity of the Tungsten headphones. And that's all because gold is less conductive than a metal like silver, and thinner wire is less conductive than a thicker wire. But according to Ryan, that all resulted in a better sound. And I believe him because these sound great. You know another headphone that uses gold wiring in the trace of the driver and sounds fantastic? The $6,000 HiFiMan Susvara. So is the Tungsten a $2,000 Susvara? Definitely not. The Tungsten does not offer the technical prowess that the Susvara does. On top of that, they're also very differently tuned, or at least very differently perceived. What the Tungsten does offer is a headphone that performs extremely well at its price point, and one that I think is brilliantly tuned. This is not a giant killer headphone, but it is one of the best headphones that you can buy at the price, if you can drive it. Let's jump straight to a comparison to describe how the Tungstens sound, and also to explain why I'm calling them fat. Film well. These days, for a little less money than the Tungstens, you can buy yourself a pair of HE1000SE headphones from HiFiMan. These used to cost way more money, and they're the next best thing in the HiFiMan lineup to the Susvaras. Talking about design and build quality for a moment, I think the Tungstens look and feel much better built, and they're equally as comfortable, which is to say they're extremely comfortable. On top of that, the Tungstens come with a really nice cable, which the HiFiMans don't, and you can very quickly and easily swap pads on the Tungsten too. When you put each of these headphones on and crank up your tunes, the differences continue. My first thought when listening to Lilypad through the Tungstens was that these might be the perfectly tuned headphone. Corey Wong's guitar has both weight and articulation, which gives it both rhythm and soul. The horn section is textured, bright, and smooth. The bass is punchy and tight, but it also has weight and authority, and there are some wood blocks played in the percussion in Lilypad, and you can hear them clearly from the tungstens, but they're also clearly in the background. It's a totally engaging listen across the board from the tungstens. And so I was thinking, could it possibly get better? No, not for the money. From the HE1000SE, the guitar is more articulated, but it loses weight. It keeps the rhythm, but it hasn't got as much soul. The bass is super tight and controlled, but it lacks the same degree of weight and punch. It's fair to say that the HE1000SE does deliver a greater sense of space in the soundstage, but to me that's probably its only win here. For instance, the horns are very crisp from the HE1000SE, but the trumpet's a little bit over-enhanced, and that separates it artificially from the rest of the horn section, and so you lose the sense of coherency and togetherness that horn section should have. The trumpet now sounds like it's playing on its own, rather than as part of a cohesive horn section. Interestingly, if you look at the measurements of these two, they're not that different, and that's why we need to talk about weight. The tungsten sounds like a heavier driver, perhaps a tiny bit slower to respond, but able to move more mass and therefore deliver more impact and a more live sound. That's why I say that it's fat, and it's why I love its sound. The tungstens deliver a neutral tuning, but with weight and authority, so it never feels clinical or sterile. At the same time, it's completely balanced from bass all the way through to treble. It's not the most technical sounding headphone, but it's not lacking, it's just not exceptional. It also doesn't throw a particularly huge soundstage, and in fact it reminds me of the ZMF Caldera in that way. Separation of sounds and the focus of the image are excellent, but the total sense of space isn't as grand as competitors like the HE1000SE. For the record, I think the Caldera is technically a little bit stronger, as are some other headphones that no doubt you're wondering about, such as the Meze Elite, the Focal Utopia. Those are all technically at a different level compared to the tungstens, but they're also a lot more expensive. I wish I had a Caldera here to compare because I think that's probably the closest actual comparison in terms of tonality, authority and weight, but I am pretty comfortable that technically the Caldera is better as it should be for the price. Before we go too much further though, we should talk about pad swapping, and the first thing to say is that this is an absolute clinic in pad swapping design. They just pop off, they just pop on. The bundle with the NLium headphone amp comes with the leather pads and the hybrid pads, but the leather pads are the stock option on the tungstens, and I believe it's the right choice. Those are the pads that I used for the comparisons with the HE1000SE. Swapping to the hybrid pads steals a little bit of the weight from the tungstens. Some might like that, but it's not for me. It also reduces the sense of attack in the sound a little bit, and so sounds like the percussive strike in the first hit of a piano key, or the hit of a drumstick on a snare or a cymbal just lose a little bit of energy with the hybrid pads. That reduction in energy up top might be helpful on some systems. I was using the Burson Soloist Voyager as my amp during this testing, and it's quite a smooth and refined headphone amp to start with. But across many amps, including the full-sized NLium Amp 23R, the portable NLium HPA23RMH, and even on the FiiO K19, I always found the leather pads were my preference. One advantage for some people from the hybrid pads is that the vocals are a little bit smoother, and so those of you that love a creamy, smooth vocal with a bit more emphasis on the vocals thanks to that reduced treble energy, people with those preferences are going to love the hybrid pads. But to me, as I tried lots of different tracks, I just felt like the hybrid pads muted everything a touch too much. And to me, the leather pads consistently delivered a wonderful balance of tonality, texture, detail and energy without ever going too far. Basically, tonal balance and the ease of listening and enjoyment was always top notch for me with the tungstens running the leather pads. And so I think the tungstens are one of the very best headphones you can buy at the price, and probably one of the very best tuned headphones, full stop. And that's all thanks to them having a very natural or neutral tuning with a good sense of fatness. And this is something I haven't really noticed from any other headphones lately, or possibly ever. You can get greater technical performance from Meze Elites, Focal Utopias, Abyss 1266, or HiFiMan Susvara, Audeze LCD-5, but I don't think any of them could claim tuning superiority. Partly that's because tuning is subjective and we all hear it a little bit differently, but it's also partly because these are just such a magnificently tuned headphone that's so wonderfully balanced from top to bottom. And so if that sounds good to you, as always, links are in the description down below. For now though, I want to say a huge thanks to channel members, to channel Patreon members, and to those of you that leave super thanks here on videos like this one. Of course, if you like the sound of the tungstens, which you should because they're amazing, and you want to find the perfect amplifier to pair with them, I'll link you up here to my review of the Enlium amp bundled with the tungsten headphones, because that's a match made in heaven, so watch this video next. In the meantime, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.